So I want to preface this with this is going to be a little bit of a longer video because we have a lot to get through. And this is one of the harder parts of Unit 1. Okay, so let's start up here with label the parts of a fraction. Okay, what's the top of a fraction called? What's the top of a fraction called? Hopefully you know that that's called your numerator. So numerator. And we talked about this before. That line in the middle, that's your division bar. So this is your division bar. So what's this number on the bottom called? What's that number on the bottom of a fraction called? It's called a denominator. And knowing this vocabulary is going to be really important. You've learned this vocabulary before, which is why we don't have it as vocabulary. Okay, so that should have been review. Numerators on top, denominators on bottom. Okay, so what do you think it means to have common denominators? So now we're coming over here and we're looking at that definition. What does it mean to have common denominators? Well, common means something that a lot of people have. Denominator is the bottom of a fraction. So it's when the denominators, room for that up there, T-E-N. So when the denominators of two or more fractions, are the same. So I gave you some examples here. These two fractions, do they have the same denominator? So denominator is the bottom number. Do they have the same bottom number? Yes. What about this one? Do they have the same denominator? No, so these are not common denominators. Okay. So now let's talk about adding or subtracting fractions. There's a little song over here. If you like to remember songs, there's one. I'll also post a video of another song from YouTube that kind of has the steps to remember subtracting fractions. So step 1 is to make sure they have the same denominator. So the same denominator or common denominators. Okay, so we want them to have common denominators. So make sure they have common denominators. And that's this part of the song where it says the bottom numbers must be the same, since that's what we said. And then it tells you how to change the bottom so they're same. So if they're not common denominators, how to do that. So you do that by multiplying or dividing. You've definitely learned that before, so I'm going to just touch on that barely. Don't forget, if you do that, that it has to be done to the top as well. Okay. So after we make sure they have common denominators, then we add or subtract whatever is happening in the problem, the numerators. So we make sure they have common denominators, then we add or subtract the numerators, and then if it's possible, we simplify. Okay, if it's possible, we simplify. Which, again, if you don't remember how to do that, I'm going to show you. Okay, so let's look at an example here. So let's look at example 1, letter A. Does this have step 1, common denominators? So if it helps, write the steps there. Step 1, common denominators. These numbers on the bottom are both 8, right? So I would say They have common denominators. So that means we can add or subtract the numerators. We're adding. So let's add up the numerators. So what's 6 plus 5? That gives us 11. So that was step 2. And that just gets put over our common denominator. So it's 11 plus 8. Okay. Does anybody remember what that's called if your numerator is bigger than your denominator? If your numerator is bigger than your denominator, it's called an improper fraction. And we don't want that. We want it to be simplified. So now we're going to simplify. Simplifying is when we take out a denominator. So right now you have 11 pieces, right? So think about it as dots. So you have 11 dots. 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have 11 dots. We're taking away 8 of those dots. So we're taking away 6, 7, 8. And they're all getting packaged together. And that becomes a 1. How many do we have left? Oh, I took too many. Hold on. So how many do we have left? We have 3 left over. 3 out of 8 left over. So 11/8 becomes 1 3/8 when we do step 3 and simplify. Okay. So now subtraction works the same way. So let's first start off. Do they have, step 1, common denominators? Do they have the same number in the denominator? Yeah, so check that off. So step 2 is the add or subtract. This time we're subtracting. So what's 11 minus 3? That gives us 8. We put it over the denominator of 12. But we can still simplify that because both of those numbers can be divided by the same number. So both of those share a number in common. They both have 4 in common. So I can divide them both by 4. So I divide the top by 4 and divide the bottom by 4. Remember, what we do to one, we have to do to the other. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So our answer went from 8/12 to 2/3, and that's called simplifying. Whenever you answer problems from here on out, your answers must be in simplest form. So this is called simplest form. Okay, so your answers must be simplified if possible. Okay, so now I want you to pause and try letter C. And I'm just going to have the answer up, but make sure you have the work down. So pause and try C. All right, so I got the answer of 1 after I got it into simplest form. So now let's look at example 2. Now we have to get them. Now we're doing the same thing. So step 1 is to make sure they have common denominators. Do these denominators have the same number? No. So step 1, they don't have the same number. So that means we have to make them have common denominators. So that means we want both fractions to have the same bottom number. So what bottom number could they both have in common? What number can 4 and 8 both go into? Hopefully you said 8. They both go into 8. What do I need to do to 4 for it to become 8? What do I need to do to 4 to make it become 8? I have to multiply by 2. So I have to do that to the top. Multiply by 2. So now our 4 becomes an 8, and our 3 becomes a 6. This other fraction's already an 8, so I don't need to do anything to it because he's already there. So then this becomes a 5. So now step one actually changes to yes. Now they both have a denominator of 8. So now we can add or subtract. In this case, we're adding. So we add 6 plus 5, which gives us that 11 over 8. Simplify it, take out 8 pieces. So we get 1 whole piece. We have 3 left over. Add to 8. Okay, so this is how it's going to work for all of them. So try B, C, and D. So you're going to need to find common denominators. I will give you a hint for D beforehand. You have 1 whole piece. So you have 1 whole thing. You can change that 1 into a 7 out of 7. Because if you have 7 pieces of 7, that turns into a 1. So you would make it, you might be thinking, well, how did she get 7 there? I said that because the other fraction's denominator is a 7. If it was a 6, I would do 6 out of 6. If it was a 10, I would do 10 out of 10. So whatever it is, I would just do the same denominator there. So try B, C, and D. I'm going to just have the answers. You need to show the work. Okay, so here's the 3 answers. Okay, so make sure if you don't understand any of this that you ask questions in class, okay? That say, hey, I need more help practicing getting common denominators. Can you explain it again or show another trick? Okay, so please ask questions. Down here, just like the music before, I have a little chart here. A little chart that will help us. Why is it going crazy? That may help you to remember. So it breaks it down into a chart. Do they have common denominators? Yes. Follow these steps. No. Follow these steps, okay? So it kind of breaks it up for you. So let's go to the next page. Let's go to the next page. Now we're adding or subtracting mixed numbers. So we're taking what we did before with fractions and just taking it to the next level with the mixed numbers. So the only thing that's really different is we're adding one more step. And that step is to make mixed numbers into improper fractions. So we need to convert our mixed numbers into an improper fraction. Besides that, all of the steps are the same. So hopefully you remember the steps. First step, get common denominators. So get common denominators. Add or subtract the numerators. Okay, and then simplify. All right, so for this down here, this is a mixed number. In case you didn't remember, we said it earlier in the video, but this is a mixed number. We want to get it to an improper fraction. So maybe you remember how to do that. Okay, so looking at these two numbers, this 6 and this 2, so you take the denominator and multiply it by the whole number. And that gives you a number. So 6 times 2 is 12. So now that we have that 12 number, now we're going to add our numerator to that. So 12 plus 5 gives us 17. So again, the denominator and the whole number, you multiply together. That gives me 12. Then you add the numerator to what the product just was. So 12 plus 5 is 17. Now we stick that over our denominator. So now that's really 17 sixths. Okay? So that's our first step. If they're not already in improper fractions, make them improper fractions. Okay, cool. So let's look at example 3. So looking at A, first thing we need to do is make them improper fractions. So multiply, add. 2 times 9 is 18. 18 plus 4 is 22 ninths. 1 times 9 is 9. Plus 2 is 11 ninths. So now we have them as improper fractions. Now, do they have common denominators? Yes. So now we add our numerators. 22 plus 11 is 33 ninths. Okay. So now we simplify. How many times does 9 go into 33? It goes 3 times with 7 left over out of 9. If it really helps you to visualize it, draw those dots. Draw 33 dots, put them into groups of 9, and then you'll see that you have those 7 left over. Okay, so now I want you to pause and try B and C. So pause and try letters B and C. All right, so hopefully you got 3 1/6 and 11. If you didn't get those answers, go back and try to figure it out again. Okay, so let's look at example 4 now. So what's a little different here about these? So think about what's a little different about this example. Hopefully you thought one's a mixed number and then we're adding or subtracting a whole number. So one's a mixed number and one's a whole number. So that doesn't really change a lot, but it is somewhat helpful to remember that it does change a little bit. So always start by making things improper fractions. Okay, so 4 times 4 is 16, plus 3 is 19 fourths, plus 2. Okay, we want to make this 2 into an improper fraction as well. Remember when we had that 1 and we made it into 7/7? Because 7 out of 7 is one group. But now we have 2 groups. We have 2 sets of 7, or in this case, 2 sets of 4. So this 2 really becomes an 8 out of 4, because we have 2 groups of 4 in that 8. Okay, and that's what you're going to want to do for all of these other whole numbers here. Make them into improper fractions, and you could do that by simply taking your denominator, multiplying it by the whole number, and putting that number on top in the numerator. Okay, but now we still have to add them. 9 plus 8 is 27 over 4. But don't forget to simplify. How many groups or how many times does 4 go into 27? It goes 6 with 3 left over. Okay, so I want you to pause and try the next 2. I am going to put the numbers of the 6 and the 9 in improper fraction form. So that way, if you got stuck on that part, you at least have that. Okay, so pause. All right, so for this first one, 54 over 6. Second one, 36 over 6. And then our answers are here in black. Okay, make sure you put them in simplest form, as simplified as possible. Okay, so one more example and then 2 more for you to try. These ones, again, are just a little bit different, as in the fact that they don't have common denominators. So not only do we need to make these mixed numbers and proper fractions, but then we have to find common denominators. So see, things are kind of building upon themselves. So if you're a little rusty with something, make sure you get practice in that, okay? So let's make them improper fractions, multiplying the denominator by the whole number and adding the numerator. So 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18/5. Luckily, we don't have to do it for the second one. But now we have different denominators. What number do both of those numbers go into? So I'm thinking 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Wait, 4 also goes into 20. So I'm going to put both of these over 20. Okay, that's a pretty big number, but we'll figure it out. 5 times what gives me 20? Both of you said 4. So don't forget what we do to the bottom, we do to the top. If you need to do some side math, do it. Like, I don't know what 18 times 4 is off the top of my head. So I'm doing some side math. I get 72 out of 20. Okay. 4 times what gives me 20? 4 times 5. What we do to the top, we do to the bottom, and vice versa. So 1 times 5 is 5. So what's 72 minus 5? Because that's our next step. Subtract. 72 minus 5 is 67 twentieths. How many times does 20 go into 67? 3 times with 7 left over. And that's our answer. Okay, so try these next two. I started off with big numbers. They won't be so big in these next couple, okay? So try them, and I'm just going to put the answers down. So make sure you have the word. Make sure you always put your answers in simplest form. Okay, there they are, 8/15, and 1 2/3. Okay, please, if you don't know how to do something, you ask in class, or you practice some, and if you're still not getting the same answers when you check the key, that you ask then, or ask the people around you, okay? Make sure you definitely ask questions, because this is a doozy.